Pog is, simply put, an interjection used similarly to wow, named after the expression which betrays emotions of shock and amazement. This face was made by Ryan Gutierrez, cancelled for racism, who also played Pogs, which is a game played with the bottle caps of a fruit drink called Pog, named after its ingredients, passion fruit, orange, and guava. You might already know this story since I've already told it, but what you might not know is that there are other words that also have long etymologies. That might have occurred to you previously, actually, but certainly no one would be crazy enough to put it into a video, right? That's what I thought. So let's start with a simple one. Draw. One of my favorites on this channel. Draw comes from a Proto-Indo-European trek, which means to drag. We also see this in the word drag, which is from Norse. We see this in many of the definitions of draw nowadays, both in terms of drawing a weapon or in the sense of attracting attention. We also see this in the word attract, which is from Latin. Anyway, that later evolved into letting an object trail behind you, as we see in trawl, which is from French, and then drawing an object along the surface of another object, often leaving an image, as we see in trace, which is from Latin. How many times did this word make it into English? Anyway, then we get to the modern definition of draw, which means to make an image. So this shows the many forms this can take. Draw, despite remaining in its home language, changed meaning, but words can also change form, they can change usage. Basically, any kind of change will be mentioned in this video. Because I'm interested, let's actually take a look at how many times trek made it into English. Now, the relationship between trahere and trek is actually debated, because we would expect ta into the into fa for frahere, but it's possible it was loaned from intermediate sources. If that's the case, we have draw, drag, dredge, traction, and tractor, every prefix version of tract, which is contract, subtract, detract, distract, attract, retract, abstract, and protracted, trace, trail, trawl, possibly troll, and troquet. Turtle is unrelated. It is from French tortue, which also gives tortoise. This is from Latin tortuga, which is presumed to exist based on this and the Spanish tortuga, but not attested. In fact, the form that we see in late Latin is tartaruja. Now, this is from the Greek realm of Tartarus, the realm of the dead, which is potentially named after Tartessus, a city in modern-day Spain. We can simplify this drawing because French inheriting it doesn't count as a link. Now, this city is confusing. It could be named after a river, or maybe it's named after Tarshish, which was loaned from the language of the region, or it might be related to Tarsus, which is named after a local god. So geography is confusing, but I'm going to err on the side of caution and say that it doesn't beat Pog. So next is monkey. The Arabic word maimun refers to a baboon, referencing their hands. You may have heard this before because it's a fairly common term used worldwide. However, English got a version received via Spanish mamona, which is shortened into Italian mona and French mon, which becomes the Middle Low German name Monica, which is used as the name of an ape in a fairy tale, and that becomes monkey. Pretty neat, but just pinballing around European languages is hardly that interesting. So next up is Buccaneer. Originally hailing from the New World, a wooden grill is referred to by a mbucae in Old Tupi. This yields the French word bouquin, and a verb boucaner, meaning to use such a grill to cook meat, and of course Buccaneer for someone who uses such a grill to cook meat. And apparently state-sanctioned pirates must have done that a lot, because they received the moniker of Buccaneer in English. Okay, well, that one was too short. Let's do a neologism. Lolicon is another one I've discussed previously. It's from the Japanese rorikon, which is an adaptation of English Lolita complex. For some reason, they kept ma to na, but they switched the luz back into ras. Anyway, that's a reference to Vladimir Nabokov's novel Lolita, where there's an unreliable pedophile narrator who thinks the kid was asking for it, but the book itself is named after its title character, which is a diminutive and reduplication of Dolores, which means pain, but it's ultimately a clipping of Our Lady of Pain. Anyway, a complex is a psychology term for like a bunch of ideas and predispositions that are woven together to create one unified pension. Whatever. Point is, it's called woven together. Anyway, yeah, pretty long. Lots of changes to meaning. I think that's pretty good. What other neologisms are there? Lowkirkenuinely is a combination of low-key, kirk, and genuinely. Genuine is the easiest. It just means native, literally from birth, which is also what native means. Low-key is not actually the easiest to track. Obviously, it means subdued in relation to an imaging technique where colors are muted and generally the subject is in less focus. It's very unclear what exactly the key is, but it's likely using key as in central, which is from keys being some sort of answer and able to unlock everything else and keep it working. Kirk, like a lot of names, has a storied history. I believe it's from the name of some podcaster or something, but their family name is related to the continental form of church, which is actually ultimately from Greek before making it to Proto-Germanic, meaning of the Lord, clipped from house of the Lord, if you can imagine. So that's a lot of lines. However, this is a competition for the longest, not the most arrows. We're not going to let some acronym or portmanteau cheat its way to the top. Yes, POG is an acronym, but that's not why it's long. Whatever. Meta. Meta and off-meta are adjectives for video game character options that refer to how strong they are in the context of alternative options. That, of course, references the game within a game of building your strategy and then playing it, or metagame. Now, the prefix meta doesn't originally mean a thing within a thing, it means beyond or following. However, in the context of beyond the real world or the physical world, we get metaphysics. I don't really understand metaphysics, but it's sort of like the study of a world within a world or something like that. Anyway, that becomes self-referential, which becomes metagame, which becomes meta. Nitroboost is from the chemical nitrogen oxide, often inserted into a car's engine to provide a speed boost. Nitrogen itself is, of course, named after niter, which is like saltpeter. It's from Greek via Romance and ultimately from Egyptian, which is in turn named after NTR, a root meaning God, presumably for its usage in ancient Egyptian rituals. Okay, these neologisms aren't working. Let's do another one that got bounced around Europe. Quiver is ultimately from Hunnic, which may have loaned it from a Mongolic language, or it may be a Mongolic language. We don't know too much about Hunnic. Anyway, from there it becomes Proto-Germanic kokar, which becomes Dutch kokare, French Quiver, and English quiver. That's still not enough languages. More languages. Zen, metaphorically meaning a state of peace and enlightenment, is from a denomination of Buddhism practiced in Japan and China, specifically from the Japanese word Zen, which is loaned from Chinese Jian, a shortening of Jianna, which is from Sanskrit Chana. Still not enough languages. Turk is, if you can believe it, from Turkic before being loaned into Persian, into Greek, and into Latin, where it's used to form the name of a country. That makes it into English as Turkey, which is then used to refer to guinea fowl, but nobody cares about guinea fowl, so they swapped it over to turkeys. Is that enough languages? Let's swap back to neologisms. Soyjak is from Wojak, which is Polish for warrior, the online handle of a Polish artist who lent their distinctive art style to these cartoons, perhaps influenced by Wojak, but no doubt this was influenced by Jack, the name of Aramaic origin, after being loaned through the old Greek Latin English pipeline. Actually, it's a combination of Jacques, which is from Jacob, and Jenkin, which is apparently from John, but that's not the biggest route in Soyjak, plus it's barely a part of Soyjak. And soy, on the other hand, is from soy boy, which is from soy milk or soybean, both of which are from soy, ultimately from Japanese via Dutch, and maybe the Japanese was influenced by the Chinese, but that seems unlikely. The spelling certainly is, but that's just what kanji is. Kanji are. A troll is someone who trolls, which is a fishing technique where you, like, drag it around in the water or something. Point is, the definition was probably enforced by troll, like I mentioned, but troll itself used to just mean to wander around, from French and actually back over from Proto-Germanic. You could also argue that the sudden swap from verb to noun was influenced by the fantasy creature. Stan means an obsessive fan of something. The folk etymology is stalker plus fan, but it's actually from an Eminem song where he takes the conceit of an obsessive fan by the name of Stan. Of course, that's not where the story begins. Where does Stan come from? Well, two sources. The first is Stanley, a native English name that means stone Lee. Lee is a dialectical term for a meadow, but it's also an Americanized version of the Slavic name Stanislav, which means the one who becomes strong, or has become strong. My list is running low, as is the time I have left. Mesmerize is loaned from French and refers to the illusory tactics of one Franz Anton Mesmer, a variant of the German surname Mesner, which is borrowed from Latin mansionem, which is mansion and also means the place where you stay. Buffalo sauce is named after the city of Buffalo, New York, which is named after the Buffalo Creek upon which it sits. This creek was named after the animal, which is technically bison that had the wrong name transposed over onto them, but who really cares? Anyway, the English version of this word is from some Iberian language descended from Latin, which is from Greek, which is possibly from some earlier pre-Greek source. That's probably good enough, right? I feel like it, at least, but we'll keep going, and that leaves rice, which is from French, which is from Italian, which is from Greek, which is from somewhere in the Middle East, which is from Sanskrit, which is probably ultimately from Dravidian. Orange is very similar, from French, Italian, but Arabic from Persian rather than Greek, from Sanskrit, from Dravidian, so surely one of those is long enough to beat Pog. Wait. No!